to this event. This is RJ Julia Booksellers virtual author event with Stephen Haff. We are so excited to have him here talking about Kid Quixotes. He'll be in conversation tonight with Karen Schumann. She is our kids event manager, and so much more. That title is silly. She does everything for the store. She's fabulous, and the book is wonderful. I can't wait to get to it. But before we do that, just a couple of little things, and forgive me as I'm admitting folks into the event as well. You are muted, and you will stay muted as a guest for the entire event. The questions that you may have, please enter them into the chat box function. They should be private. I will monitor those and send. We will get to as many questions as we can. So don't worry about that. Just put them type your questions right in at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. If you want to set your view functions to speaker view, that's in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and that way you'll have focus on Stephen and Karen, who will be the ones speaking, because I will not be very soon. So that's a good little tip in case you don't want the gallery view of everybody's pictures with us. And last but not least, please consider purchasing a copy of Kid Quixotes at rjjulias.com. Karen's holding it up for us right now. And Stephen was so wonderful to sign book plates for us. So if you buy your book today or tonight, we will include a signed custom book plate to go with your copy of Kid Quixotes while supplies lasts. I'll send some of that information to you as well. So I think I rambled on for far too long. Without further ado, we welcome Stephen Haff and Karen Schumann. Take it away, my friends.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction, but I'm actually going to read part of the book. It's part of the acknowledgments that Stephen wrote, which I just find so spectacular. So here's a little introduction through Stephen's own words. I have been lucky beyond all right. I was born into middle-class prosperity in a corner of the world untouched by public violence, and I grew up privately in peace. Now I have access to medications that have saved my sanity and saved my life in the ongoing war against bipolar depression. My diploma from Yale casts a spell on all who hear that name, a spell that produces renewed opportunity after every downfall. I'm able to swim every morning to sustain my physical health and peace of mind. My family has an apartment we can afford to live in. We never run completely out of food, unlike some of the families I've worked with who have lived on coffee, toast, and ketchup. And I have time to sleep, read, think, play with my kids, apply for grants, organizing fundraising events, and write this book. And the opportunity to write this book came about because Valeria Lucella wrote about the Kid Quixotes in the New York Times. Thank you, Valeria, for that and everything else you've done. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stephen Haff.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Karen, for having me. I'm going to start by setting the context for a scene I'm going to read. And then after I read the scene, Karen and I are going to speak for a little while together, and you can ask questions and I'll answer them. And I just want to say off the top, if you want to follow up on this conversation, you can reach me. Just go to kidquixotes, plural.com. Just go to that address and then you'll find my contact information and everything there if you'd like to talk more about anything that comes up during this session. All right, so the book is the story of my teaching career and how my ideas about teaching and learning have changed over the years. So the excerpt I'm going to read happens in the fall of 2016, just after the federal election in the United States. We're at Stillwater's in a storm, my one-room schoolhouse in the Bushwick neighborhood of Brooklyn. That's a neighborhood of predominantly Spanish-speaking immigrants and refugees. 4 tables have been pushed together in the center of the room, and we're all sitting around those tables and facing each other. And we are myself and a group of kids ages 5 to 17 whose families came here in desperation from Mexico and Ecuador. The one rule in this group is everyone listens to everyone. 5-year-olds listen to 17-year-olds, and 17-year-olds listen to 5-year-olds. The ritual is the same in English, Spanish, or Latin. Each person writes, then reads out loud what they've written as everyone listens. In this scene, we're working on our Quixote project, which continues today, 4 years after it started, collectively translating and adapting the novel Don Quixote as a series of brief, bilingual, English and Spanish, musical adventure plays. The kids are reimagining the story of an old man in Spain 400 years ago as the stories of their own lives, children here in this room right now. The kids have been writing about voyages because the Quixote is, after all, a road trip. One girl, Sarah, 7 years old, has been especially shy so far in this process. She never reads her work out loud. This is her breakthrough. And now I turn to the book. The rescuing song is based on an early scene in the novel where Quixote, having been viciously beaten by a traveling bully, lies bruised on the dusty desert road, unable to stand. A neighbor passes by and stops to help. After washing the dust off of Quixote's face, the neighbor carries the old man home, but first waits until the dark of night can protect the fallen hero from the unsympathetic eyes of the gossiping village. The kids are in awe of this anonymous, unconditional, unrewarded kindness. "It's like my mom," says Percy, who is 7 years old. "She is patient with my tantrums, and she always brings me books." To prepare for lyric writing, we all write in silence for 15 minutes, telling stories from our own lives related to the neighbor's actions. Then we take turns reading our stories out loud as the group listens. All of the kids write about their mothers. Their mothers wash for them, cook for them, put them to bed with a gentle hand and a soft voice, stay awake on nights when the children are sick, placing a cold washcloth on a hot forehead and whispering, "shh," the sound the child first hears inside the mother's body, the swishing of warm amniotic fluid in the unborn ears. And the mothers hug and hug and hug away the fear and the anger and the falling. No mother is paid for doing all of this. No mother is famous for being a mother. The only child not to read her work is Sarah. For the first 2 months of the Traveling Adventures project, she has been quiet during class. When asked to read her writing to the group, she has shaken her head no. Sarah has been coming to the Stillwater's writing class on Saturdays since the spring, but she has yet to read aloud her own work, always asking a volunteer or another kid to read for her and to protect her privacy. by not revealing her name. The Quixote group is about half the size of the big writing class, and there's nowhere for her to hide anymore, so she simply refuses. Then one day, in private, during a break, Sarah informs me that at her school, they're kind of rough on people, she says. Everything you say is only right or wrong. She tells me that she sits at her desk in class and never moves and never says anything. The school sent a social worker to inspect the house and interview her parents. The social worker asked if there is violence at home, but there isn't any. Sarah is just hiding, holding her mother's leg when faced with a stranger, or hanging on to her desk in class. At school, she doesn't know what is coming next. Play is not allowed. A vague threat of punishment for being wrong fills the air like humidity, and in her innocence, she is afraid. How do I help Sarah to be brave? I don't want to force her to read to the group. That could inflict trauma. I remember a story my paternal grandfather, Papa, once told me, a story that guides my teaching and illuminates this problem. At age 10, in 1917, he had won a bamboo fishing pole in a small town raffle, way up in the mountains of northern Idaho. His father told him he would need to wrap the pole in thread, an intricate procedure requiring great patience. His father said that he himself needed to rewrap his own pole, too. So they sat side by side on the porch and wound thread around their bamboo poles. My grandfather added, at the end of the story, that looking back, he suspected that his father didn't really need to rewrap his own fishing pole. Today, remembering Papa's side-by-side education and my father's tendency, as long as I can remember, to read whatever book I happened to be reading so we could think side by side, I sit next to Sarah as we write, and when it's my turn, I read to the group, showing her the way by making myself vulnerable. There was a time, I say, reading from my paper, when I thought nobody loved me. I called the city's phone number for depression. A woman answered and said her name was Sarah. Our little Sarah at Stillwater's looks up, and there is that face again, eyes and mouth wide open at the coincidence of names. She asked how she could help me, and I began to cry, she being the adult Sarah on the phone. My mother had raised me to cry, telling me that whenever I needed to, I could let the tears fall and keep going until whatever was stopping me was washed away. And I couldn't stop crying for a long, long time. I cried so hard I choked and coughed, and boogers came out of my nose. The word boogers makes the kids laugh. But Sarah did not hang up the phone. I kept repeating, "Nobody loves me." 2 hours of conversation later, after telling that grown-up Sarah that I had not left my apartment for days, eating only boiled eggs and saltine crackers and food left outside my door by friends I would not allow to enter, I agreed to go to the hospital. At the hospital, the psychiatrist, Heather, after listening to me for a long time, I don't tell the kids about the bandage on my wrist, told me she would rather have 2 broken legs than have what I had inside me. She promised me that I would feel better, but I would need to work very hard for a long time with the help of a therapist to understand my story. And she was right. The more I told my story, the better I understood myself, and the more peaceful I felt in my heart. I want the kids, especially the reticent Sarah sitting beside me, to know that here, in this room, in our sanctuary, it is safe to be vulnerable, which comes from the Latin for able to be wounded. because here nobody will wound you. Here you can breathe. No one will drop from the sky and carry you away. After weeks of refusing and listening and watching with those bottomless black eyes, as other children and grown-ups read their stories, on this one day, this day of vulnerability, Sarah, daring beyond daring, raises her hand, is called on, and begins to read. She says, "My mommy rode across the desert on the back of a tiger. That's how she came here from Mexico." At first, nobody speaks. Then they can't stop asking questions. These questions are born not from doubt, but a love of adventure. "Really?" "Yes, really. She told me in Spanish at bedtime." "How long did it take them to get across the desert?" 2 weeks." "How did they cross the border?" "They came to a very high wall. It went as far away as they could see, to the left and to the right. The tiger said, 'I can't jump over the wall. You need to carry on alone now.' My mommy said, 'I know you can do it. You have very strong legs.' My mommy held on to the fur of the tiger's neck. The tiger moved its head up and down and crouched and wiggled its butt." The kids all laugh. Every time they hear the word butt, with 2 T's or 1, they need to laugh. "Then it jumped over the wall. My mommy almost touched the moon. The tiger said, 'I did it.' My mommy said, 'Yes, you did it for sure.' I say, 'My cat moves her head up and down before she jumps up onto the refrigerator.' 'Wow,' says Sarah, 'that's high up.' The kids have more questions. The room is jumping. How did they eat? The tiger knew where to find water and rabbits and cactus fruit and how to step away from snakes that were hiding under the sand. How did they get to Brooklyn? They walked all the way to Brooklyn, through the desert and the forest and the fields and the ghost towns and the swamps. Sarah speaks faster and louder as she goes, releasing a horizontal avalanche of words. Nobody tried to stop them? No. When they reached the city, they stayed on dark streets with not a lot of people. The shadows protected them. Nobody saw the tiger? Yes, strangers noticed the tiger and they were afraid, so they called animal control. The tiger fought back, she says, rising up a little from her chair, with its mighty paws and long, sharp teeth, but there were too many animal control humans with nets and ropes and a dart that made the tiger sleep. My mommy said bye, and she cried. Her tears made lines on her dusty face. Sarah is now speaking in tongues, possessed and transported by the visions she has inherited from her mother. My mommy was sad for the tiger and sad for herself. She missed Mexico out in the fields. She missed the dirt between her toes and the wide open heavens above, more full of stars than darkness. Here in Brooklyn, the buildings blocked most of the sky. The electric lights erased the stars, and her feet, still bare, were punished by the unforgiving concrete. The tiger cried too, quietly, as it was falling asleep, and said, goodbye. Animal control took the beast away in a cage inside a truck. I have to pause. I have to ask my son to be quiet in the next room. Uta, could you be more quiet? Oh, yeah. I'm having a book event. Thanks. All right, pardon the interruption. You know, it's close quarters here in quarantine. So where was I? Sarah. All right, the tiger cried too, quietly, as it was falling asleep, and said, goodbye. Animal control took the beast away in a cage inside a truck. There is an awestruck silence in the room. What language did the tiger speak? Asks Lily, teenager. Spanish. My mom didn't know English then. Time's up for today, I say. Thank you, Sarah. Good job, everyone. See you next time. As the kids walk out the door, they look stunned, as if they had just met God. Thank you. That's all.
I absolutely love her story. And she should make, when I read it myself and then listening to you, she should make that into a picture book.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Oh my gosh, it would be totally amazing.
I think so too.
It was, I just loved it. So I don't even know if I can follow that up with anything. Oh my gosh, it was just that whole scene and what you've created at Still Waters goes far beyond anything that I can ever dream of. How did that all start? And with the power of reciprocal learning, where everyone listens to everyone. Where did that all come from?
Well, it was a long process of failure as a teacher before I arrived at that idea. When I began as a teacher, inexperienced teacher, I was afraid of losing control of the classroom. So I thought that in order to maintain control, I had to know everything. And that if the students figured out that there was something I didn't know, that I would lose control of them. And so there was a power struggle where I would in the worst of times, I would throw things. I threw chalk at the board and made it explode. I took a book I was reading to the class, and if they weren't listening, I threw it up in the air, or I threw it against a wall. I overturned a desk and a chair. I did all kinds of things I'm not at all proud of. And then gradually over the years, it dawned on me that I was wasting all the time and energy of everyone in the room by battling for control, when control was not the issue, was not the heart of the matter. And but it was a priority of the institution in which I worked. You know, the principal used to come by and look in the window of my high school classroom, and if she saw anyone wearing a hat, you know, like I'm wearing tonight, if they were wearing a hat in class, she would actually open the door, which I had locked. She'd take out her key, open the door, come in, interrupt the lesson, and get into a battle with the kid about taking off the hat. And the kids usually would just glare back at her and would not budge until it escalated to the point where she said she would call the security officers, the police. So that was a priority, you know, and not to say that the school system is evil for that. I understand that need, because there's only one teacher for like at least 30 kids in a room. And so the kids, you know, far outnumber the grown-ups in the building. And things can get dangerous if that population becomes angry, dissatisfied, you know, if they decide they've had enough of this. So control, for the sake of safety, is a high priority in any school. They want to protect the kids, they want to protect the teachers. So, you know, those were the values that I found myself enforcing. And also, I was basing my actions on my own assumptions about what a teacher is. That a teacher is someone who has more knowledge than students. And that's the source, that's one of the sources of the teacher's power, along with the institutional power of the school, which is a government institution. So But gradually over the years, I released more and more of that desire for control and put my energy into listening to the kids, because they were much more interesting than the curriculum that was laid out as a path before them, a path that had already been walked. But the path that was unexplored, that had yet to be blazed, was the relationship among us in the room. What stories we carry inside us, what our needs and fears are, and what makes us laugh. And so I was far more interested in the kids than in any testing or curriculum or any number of other priorities that were imposed on the classroom. So over time, I just got bolder and bolder about making my class all about listening to each other. And that doesn't mean we didn't read or write. I mean, we wrote a lot. And for example, I had my students at the high school all had journals, and every day they would write in them. And I told them that this was called our ongoing correspondence. And if anything came up in class that they wanted to say, but for whatever reason they didn't get a chance to say, either they were too afraid to say it in front of everyone else, or we ran out of time, they could write it in the journal. And then I would take their journals home every night and write back to them. But, you know, I was determined to give them the attention that they really needed, that they couldn't always get in class, because one adult is not enough for 30 children. It just is not enough. There's no family on earth that has one parent and 30 children. So it's just impossible. They can't get what they need. So, so I was trying to give them that attention through this correspondence, and like a secret correspondence. And then I realized that was impossible too. And I burned out and I broke down. I couldn't keep it up. It was too much. Because I had 5 classes, 30 students each, that's 150 kids every night. I'm writing back thoughtfully to each and every one of them. That's not sustainable. So, you know, I fell apart, and I had a massive mental breakdown. And then when I recovered with medication and years of therapy, I was determined to return to teaching, but in a situation that was safe for me, and where I would not burn out, where I would actually be nourished by the gathering, and where the kids would get the attention they need. So I invited my former students to join me, at first in my apartment, and then in the party room of a pizzeria in our neighborhood. And the group grew and grew. And then little kids started coming with the big kids, because some of the big kids had their own children, or they had little cousins or siblings. So the group outgrew all those places. And all we did, you know, that was so popular, all we did was read something together, talk about it, write something in response, not necessarily about it, but just some kind of response. And then listen to each other read out loud, and then talk to each other. And that was it. And it was so simple. And there we were in a room with, like, there was a 6-year-old girl who's listening to a 40-year-old man, and then he returns the favor and listens to her. And we were treating each other as intellectual and human equals. And with this range of ages, the little ones really lift up the hearts of the older ones. You know, they remind them of the value of innocence and joy and resilience. And then the kids bring out the best in the older ones, who suddenly find their instinct for taking care of little ones has been activated by this. So really, we are an extended family, all ages together. The youngest one we've had is 4 years old. And I don't know if I'm the oldest. No, there's some guest authors who've come who've been up into their 70s and even into their 80s, and all ages in between. And there's no test. There is no planned ahead curriculum. There's only the people in the room reading, writing, speaking, and listening to each other. And the group grew and grew, and then we had to rent a classroom in the neighborhood, and it continued to grow. So it came out of failure, and it came from brokenness. And it was an idea that I had learned in therapy, that listening itself, telling your story and having someone listen to your story and maybe ask you questions about it, was a way to recover from whatever trauma you've had in your life. And so that was many years in the making, but that one rule, everyone listens to everyone, that's my guide, you know, that's the algorithm for running a class or any group of people. And so that's, I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it did. And it touched on so many things. Mm-hmm. Immigration, yeah. It's a big issue.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want people to know who read this book about immigrants and about the immigration issues we have?
Yeah. Well, my hope is that by telling their stories, or more accurately, by allowing them to tell their stories in the book, you know, I think of this as a book that listens to people. And by allowing them to tell their stories in the book, I hope that when people read those stories, they come to know these people as individual people. Because I think one of the problems with immigration is we have labels on categories of people. You know, whether you call them immigrants, migrants, refugees, illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants. Once you get to know individual people, you can't return to the generalities. You can't return to stereotypes. You can't return to scapegoating. Once you've actually met someone and come to care about them, it dawns on you that all people deserve care. All people need love. All people have a story to tell. So that's my great hope, is that people will get to know these specific people who I love, Sarah and her classmates, and that they might come to love them too. And that might, I hope, persuade people to be open. And, you know, if they can imagine themselves in the position that my students and their families are in, if they ask themselves, if I had been born into that family, in that place at that time, that would have been me. You know, that I would have been that person on the other side of the wall. I would have been that person who's being called a criminal. So hopefully, you know, using our imagination to picture someone else's life, when you listen to their story, that puts you in their place. That puts you in their shoes. And I think it's much harder to dismiss them after that.
Well, now you've shared a lot of this already, but was it scary, like sharing your mental illness with the kids? Was there ever a moment that you like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I'm doing this?
Yes. I was worried because I had received warnings when I was hired at the Bushwick High School. Warnings, you know, things like don't ever be alone in the classroom with a student. Don't close the door if you're with students and it's not during class time. Don't keep the door to the hallway open. and then admonishing or warning us not to talk about our private lives, really, that in order to maintain respect from the students, the idea was that you must maintain yourself as an authority and have a certain distance. And also because admitting you have a mental illness is, although it's much better than it was 10 or 20 years ago, it's still a risk. People's perception of you can be altered. And, you know, I think a lot of people just say, oh, that person's crazy. You know, as soon as you hear they have a mental illness, that's a crazy person. And so there was a risk there that the kids might hear that and think, I was worried. They might think, oh, he's crazy. I can't trust him. You know, that makes him dangerous, or whatever the case might be. Or they might go home and tell their parents that their teacher said that he's mentally ill. But I did it, and I did it because I wanted to establish trust, and I had to go first. So I had to say something that was risky for me to say, to show them that I really meant it when I said that I was listening to them.
Now, were you surprised by their reaction? They just seemed kind of accepting.
Yeah.
You know,
it was not
like,
a problem.
oh, all right, you know.
Yeah, really interesting. And, you know, kids know a lot more than grown-ups sometimes imagine they do. They're taking everything in. Like just right now with the pandemic, my two little girls, they're 6 and 10 years old. It's amazing what they've internalized. You know, they were playing a game of pretend the other day where they were, one of them was working in an emergency room and the other one came in and was sick with COVID, and then she was given a shot because the doctor had miraculously come up with a cure. And so I overheard them playing, and I thought, I haven't really talked in any detail with them about all of this, and we've given up watching the news, but they are plucking from whatever they hear us saying. They're plucking all this information and they're assembling it into a picture of the world. And then when they show me what that picture is, I'm astonished. But kids are always doing this. They're geniuses. And so I felt the same way about, they seemed to know what depression was. I mean, some of them wanted to know more. They were curious. They asked me more questions about what exactly that means, or they wanted to know what it feels like. So they may have encountered people who were depressed, so they had a certain idea about that. But they definitely weren't afraid, and they were curious, and they were just totally accepting, which is a great blessing for
really
me.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The kids are so adaptable. You know, their understanding of things, they're just so ready to accept people. And that's one of the reasons that I work with them, is because they are so accepting. And you know, when they have their downfalls, they know how to pick themselves up, and they know how to pick each other up. So being around them is good for my health.
Well, that's a good thing. So before we open it up to questions, question that I always ask. So as a bookseller, I have about 10 seconds to sell someone a book. Stephen, in about 10 seconds, how would you sell your book?
I would say, this is a story about falling down and standing up.
I love it. That was definitely under 10 seconds.
Oh, good, good.
We're going to open it up to questions, I think. Oh, here they are. So let's see. I know Stephen is close with his students. what is his relationship with the parents? They must be so trusting of him.
Yes, I'm very lucky. The parents are very trusting. And I am open with them about what we do in class. They're always invited to join us in class, and sometimes they do. Although I think they appreciate the time when they can, do other work that they need to do while I'm working with their children. But they do come to class. And more than even coming to class, they supply food for our meetings, home-cooked food. And on every trip, we perform the play that we are making out of Don Quixote, the musical play. We travel all around New York City and outside New York City. We've been to Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., all over the place, Yale University in Connecticut. And on all these trips, the parents come, mothers and fathers, and they help in every way. They help keep track of all the kids, because the group has about 25 kids in it. And, sometimes kids wander. So the parents help to keep all the sheep in the flock. And they supply food. They care for kids if they fall and skin their knee. They help their kids learn their lines for the play. And I'm especially grateful that they have been patient in teaching me Spanish. That's one of the great gifts I got from all of this, is that I learned to speak Spanish. And I learned it never in school, just entirely from speaking mostly with the parents, because the kids do speak Spanish at home, but socially they mostly speak English. And they help me when I ask them questions. But the parents, I have to speak with them in Spanish. They don't have enough English, most of them. And so they teach me. I do a lot of gesturing and searching in dictionaries and all, but they're remarkably generous, astounding. And I admire them as much or more than anyone I've ever met because of what they risked for their families. To leave your home country and walk for weeks across the desert, or entrust children to human traffickers who you pay to take them to the promised land. I mean, this extraordinary courage, this sacrifice they make for their children. They want every opportunity for them, and they understand that this little school is an opportunity that's valuable. And so they're absolutely always supportive.
So now we have another question. Do you keep in touch with the kids who have grown out of your program?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, kids come back all the time. They come to the neighborhood, even students from when I taught at the high school. Now they're in their 30s and they come to say hello. They bring me their children. And the ones who've been in Stillwaters all these years, when they move on, to college, we stay in touch. It's remarkable that way. Like I said earlier, it really feels like an extended family.
Now, do your kids go with you ever?
Yes. Oh, yes. All three of them have attended classes regularly for a spell. And the two girls, my youngest two children, have actually been in the Quixote project. My 10-year-old was in the very first performance. And now my 6-year-old is a passionate young actor who also has been part of the sessions where we write the dialogue and the songs. So she loves it, absolutely loves it. And these are her friends. We homeschool her. So her sister goes to public school, but our little one is educated at home. And the kids at Stillwaters are her friends. Those are her beloved friends. And it's beautiful to watch her interact with them, because they and she have no idea what each other's skin color is. It's not even an issue at all for them. And I certainly don't say anything because I don't want to spoil this innocence. And they just love each other. They love each other's company. And she's aware that her friends' families eat somewhat different food from what we eat at home, and that they all speak Spanish. But she has never assembled that into a situation of like us versus them. Those are her friends, you know, and every person is unique. Every person has a story, and that applies to her as well as to her friends.
Well, now, here's another question. How did you come up with the name Still Waters in a Storm?
That was a collaboration between myself and one of my high school students. He, after we'd been having these meetings at my apartment and at the pizzeria, he said to me one day, we need a name for this group. And so he made a whole list of words that came to mind. And on the list, he put smooth waters. And then later on the list was this idea that there was calm in the storm. And so I said, well, if you put those together and you change smooth to still, I think we have a name. Because of the old saying that still waters run deep, which these kids really do. And stillness is also a sort of yoga or meditation idea about bringing your mental focus to a point of stillness. So, and then he explained the storm part by saying that his life was crazy and that this was the one place where he could have peace. And that young man, he's a brilliant poet, and he ended up in jail multiple times. And whenever he came out, he said that this place was his place of peace in a stormy life. And that's what it has been for everybody.
So do we have... How has distance learning been for you and the kids?
Oh, well.
That's a fun question.
Yeah, that is. We have carried on. We're using Zoom. We meet every Saturday. And, you know, if you'd like to join a meeting, you can email me. If you go to our website, you'll see that my information is there. And we meet every Saturday afternoon, and it's tricky. I mean, this is a new way of communicating and a new way of living. And I think it's odd because we're used to being together in a room. And there's something about the way we sit around those tables shoulder to shoulder that makes us feel like we've created a safe space. And the door to the classroom is closed, and we all trust each other. Well, we still trust each other, but now it's very strange because you're looking at people's faces and you're in physically different locations. And there's something about that that's difficult. But we persevere, and there are neat tricks on Zoom. Like you can push a button to raise your hand. So I can watch the whole class, and when I see that the little hand icon pops up, then I can call on people. So that's, you know, it's a nice feature so that all the voices are still involved in the class. Managing that is related, but not exactly the same as managing a live classroom in person. But, you know, any way that we can stay in touch is valuable. And we are continuing to write. We're writing the next song and the next scene of the play, and doing all that in this new way. And who knows where we're headed from here? Nobody knows. But, you know, if necessary, we'll figure out a way to perform this show online. because it's a story that keeps needing to be told. And it's a story of resilience. So, you know, that's necessary these days, to have examples of people who are bouncing back and rising up. And so the obstacles, in a way, just make it more interesting. You know, I think, oh, this just got even more interesting. How do we meet this challenge? So, yeah, it's not the same as being in the room with someone, but we are reaching towards each other, and we're still hearing each other, and that matters a lot.
So to end things, what do you want people to take away from this event?
Well, I think the one thing I'd like people to remember for pretty much any situation, be it a school or a workplace or even a family, is this idea, you know, this sort of ground rule or algorithm: everyone listens to everyone. And I think that's a way forward, you know, as we come out of a global crisis, and more than one global crisis. I mean, the environment is at a tipping point. There's all kinds of scary stuff on the way. That it becomes more important when there's so many competing voices and agendas, for people to make room for each other by listening. So our only rule is everyone listens to everyone, and that's what I would hope that people might carry away with them tonight, and that they might think about how that can be applied in daily life. We have a lot of authorities speaking out these days with conflicting messages. And I think that mutual listening is the beginning of repairing our problems.
Well, Stephen, you know, because I let you know how much this book has meant to me, and it will forever change who I am and how I do things. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of our virtual event. I encourage everyone to buy this book and read it. It is so, so amazing. So thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Karen.
It's been delightful. And thank you, everybody else, for coming. We're so glad you were a part of it, too.
Yes, thanks, everybody. I wish I could speak with you directly, but I appreciate everyone showing up and listening. And please do visit our website. Is, well, actually the easiest one, if you just type in Quixotes, plural.com, you'll get to the website, and you can read all about this, and you can contact me if you want to join a class online. You'll love it. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of laughter, and I know we can all use that these days, especially. Thank you all for listening.